Hi everyone, and welcome to our Channel Features web chat, Cybersecurity, Why MSPs Need to Practice What They Preach, sponsored by Barracuda MSP. If you have any technical difficulties during today's session, please press the Help widget on your player console to receive assistance with solving common issues. And if at any time you're having audio difficulties or issues with advancing of the slides, please hit your F5 key to refresh your webcast console. Today's web chat is being recorded and will be available on demand for 12 months starting tomorrow. You'll receive an email when it is ready. And with that, let's meet today's speakers. Nick Cavalencia is a Channel Features contributor and a Microsoft Cloud and Data Center MVP with over 25 years of enterprise IT experience. He's also an accomplished consultant, speaker, trainer, writer, and columnist for various tech topics. Mark Ballinger is a systems engineer at Barracuda MSP, a provider of security and data protection solutions for managed service providers. And with that, the floor is now yours, Nick.
Thank you very much, Jen. Hey, welcome everybody to today's webcast. This is a really interesting topic because normally as an MSP, having been a former MSP owner myself, we tend to be focused very much on our customers. And specifically, even if you're thinking about offering security services or you already are offering security services, there's a bit of that, the old adage of like the plumber never does their own plumbing at home. And there's some of that kind of true to form here where we're so focused on our customers, spending so much time trying to secure their environments that we don't do our own IT work and we don't secure our own environments. And because of that, the bad guys are keenly aware of that fact and are trying to take advantage of it. So as I sort of to kind of open up for Mark today, kind of talk about the problem a little bit and discuss what's involved, I really want to kind of focus on why it is that MSPs are targets today. First off, you've no doubt kind of seen, hopefully in the news over the last number of months, a bunch of different articles that have come out. I have two of them I'm going to pop up here on the screen just as examples, kind of to show you how some of the different ways that that cybercriminal organizations, sometimes it's state-sponsored, sometimes it's just attacker-based, but they're taking advantage of MSPs and their access. So the first one here you can see, there's a cloud service provider named Data Resolution. They tried to hit them with Ryuk ransomware. This was back at the very beginning of the year. You can see 30,000 customers. Now, those are big numbers. I'm assuming that most of you don't have thousands and tens of thousands of customers. You might have hundreds of customers or tens of customers, maybe thousands of customers, but you can see where the idea is here, if I get access to the cloud service provider and they, by logic, sort of have access to all their customers, hopefully, there's an opportunity to actually encrypt a large number of organizations and take a huge raking in. And if you've noticed specifically in ransomware, whether applying to MSPs or even your end customers, the growing trend right now is, to quote Tom Cruise from one of his movies years ago, they're going for scorched earth. That's what they're trying to literally encrypt absolutely everything so that your business comes to a halt, and that way you've got to pay the ransom because no amount of recovery is going to help you. It's just too much recovery, take too much time, that sort of thing. So that's one example. Another one, the Chinese-sponsored hacker group APT10. You can see here they actually attacked an MSP called Visma. This basically affected almost 850,000 of their customers. There's another one I didn't have here, which is another cloud service provider called Cloud Jumper. They actually were able to stop it, but it was Ryuk again, another ransomware attack. So there's lots of this stuff in the news where we're seeing these types of attacks on cloud and managed service providers. And the bad news is, if I step back from this specific problem for a second and I look at the trends that I'm seeing overall, the shifts that I see in the attack methodologies that the cyber criminal organizations are using, they're paying attention to the trends themselves. They're seeing something like, go back to my example of the scorched earth methodology for ransomware, we actually started seeing it, and then we started seeing a proliferation of it everywhere. They realized, that's a great idea. We should be doing that too. And then they start doing it as well. So you've seen this no doubt in the news, and that's part of the problem. Is it exacerbates the problem. It accelerates the the execution of that particular method, and I think we're going to see more and more of this. Island hopping, if you're not familiar with island hopping, that's the jumping from one network to another network, basically from one customer to another. It's now mainstream at this point. Stat came in earlier in the year, way back in January or so from Carbon Black, but 50% of all attacks you see here, they use island hopping on the initial victim. So the intent here is, let me go to company A, in this case that would be you. You'd be company A, and let me try to commandeer and compromise a particular endpoint, let's say, maybe get access to your email. And it could be something as simple as just taking over your email and sending off something that's malicious to all of your customers that are in your address book. But it could also be something like, let's say, more along the lines of, let's say, fraud, where they'll try to gain access to your accounts payable system and then send a false email to somebody who's in your accounts receivable system, pardon me. And they'll send an email out to company B and say, hey, I know you're supposed to pay us that $850 on Friday, but we're going to change bank accounts. Can you send it over here instead? And so that becomes sort of two tactics that island hopping gets used. And because you have so many customers and they know that there's monetary transactions going on in between, that makes you a prime candidate. There's even a warning issued by the Department of Homeland Security, and I put the URL down there. Basically, it's all state-sponsored China espionage kind of paid attack groups that are going after U.S. MSPs, and they're basically warning you about all the things that you should be doing, which is some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about a little bit today, and Mark's going to talk about as well. But there's actually an entire warning on this that came out this year. And then the reality is, if you just think about this, it really makes a whole lot of sense. You have this full access to your customers. Depending on how you have things set up, some of you might have VPNs directly in your customers. Some of you are going to use a remote desktop, whatever it is. But if the attacker can gain full access to your environment, it's just a matter of time and them doing a bunch of diligence to figure out, how do I gain access to the customer networks? And then they have admin access is the intent. Lots of victims in a single attack. It makes a whole lot more sense to try and attack you, one attack, and then they have access to, let's say, 100 companies, then try to do 100 attacks with some different varying levels of success with each one of those attacks. And then the other thing here is that, like I already mentioned, I give you just two examples of how they could leverage sort of island hopping by gaining access to your network first and then to your customer's network, where there's different kinds of attacks. So this could be something where they're trying to do phishing, could be ransomware, could be fraud, could be a data exfiltration. I mean, there's all kinds of different things they could be doing, and they do, because of the fact that it depends on what access they can get from you. And so the question then sort of becomes, what should you be doing? And at just a very high level, because I've only got about 2 or 3 more minutes left, and I'm going to hand things over to Mark, because we've got a very short webcast today. But just a couple things you should be doing. One is, if you're thinking about the plumber looking at their own plumbing, and that's really the spirit of all this, is you've got to do a risk assessment. You've got to figure out, based on the kinds of attacks that are going on, where are your greatest risks? Is it, for example, your own user? Should they be going through security awareness training, as an example? Is it you don't have, let's say, the right firewalls or email scanning or DNS scanning or some kind of solution that you might need in place, and that creates a lot of risk, and there's too much malware or phishing emails or both of those getting to, let's say, your endpoints. You have to figure out where your risks are in your environment. You've got to be thinking about this as a defense in depth methodology, layered defense, meaning you not only have multiple solutions in place, but defense in depth also means that each one of those solutions you're putting in place is going to attack the problem in a little bit different fashion. So, for example, you might have email scanning that is, for example, going to take an attachment, stick into a virtual sandbox, going to make sure that when it detonates it, does anything bad happen or not, and if nothing bad happens, then it forwards it to you. That's one methodology of protecting you. The second one is maybe having something on the endpoint, like antivirus or anti-malware as an example, that does it a different way. It's trying to scan, look at heuristics and historical and behavior and signature-based, all scanning and all that, but different methodologies. And so, because the intent is, if one methodology fails, and to some degree, maybe from a small percentage perspective, it will, history has proven that, you need to have a different way of trying to attack the problem. The next thing is monitoring. You should be watching your own network. You should be watching to see if you're having something get triggered. Maybe there's something on an endpoint. There's something within email scanning. Whatever the case is, that you have some kind of monitoring in there that you can tell when something's happening, and then you can respond to it with some level of intelligence. And the last thing is incident response. And this has to do with you having a set of tools, a process, a protocol, whatever it is, to get the environment back to a known good state. That also includes things like backups, particularly in the case of both ransomware, which everybody knows. You should definitely have that. But also in the case of someone gaining access to your network. According to Microsoft, the median number of days an attacker sits on a network before it's discovered or they're discovered is 146 days. So someone's sitting on your network for a long time, they could do a lot of stuff. They can go and find Active Directory, get access there. On the average, it takes about 2 hours and 20 minutes. And they could go ahead and give themselves admin rights and create a bunch of accounts so they gain persistence in Active Directory. I mean, there's a lot of nastiness they could be doing, adding themselves to groups, all that stuff. You got to be able to recover that back to a known good state. So backups also kind of come in play there as well. So that's a mouthful. And hopefully that kind of gives you a sense of both why you need to be paying attention to your own business. You need to be looking at your own operations and securing that, and then some resemblance of some of the things that you could be doing. So with that, I hope that kind of tees things up for you, Mark. And then Mark's got a quick presentation here he's going to do as well. We are going to do a Q&A at the end, so we've got a couple questions that have already popped into the Q&A box. If you have a question while we're talking about anything I mentioned or anything Mark's about to talk about, please stick that in the Q&A box, and we'll be doing questions at the end. So until then, Mark, the floor is yours.
All right. Thanks a lot, Nick. I really appreciate it. So yeah, as Nick said, he hit on a lot of great points, and hopefully we'll talk through a little bit about how you can utilize technology to kind of help combat those attacks and kind of protect yourself. But going back just a little bit to why the attacks on MSPs are increasing, as Nick mentioned with the island hopping, once you get access to one network, then you use their connections in that network to proliferate your attack. Well, the tough thing with MSPs is that because they're essentially a trusted advisor, they're the service provider. So if you have a service provider that sends you an email that says, hey, could you download this file, or hey, could you click this link because it's going to help us monitor your network better or protect you better, a customer is a lot more likely to click that than if they get an email from a Nigerian prince or if they get an email from their plumber that says download this file. And so it's because that MSP has a place with their customers as being trusted, they're much more likely to click on that link after it's been compromised. And so you really want to make sure that that protection is there to protect your reputation as well as protecting your customers. And so I wanted to also just step through kind of a little bit what we thought of that warning that the FBI put out, just mentioning that these advanced persistent threats are coming about consistently. And the kind of the key here is a lot of times there's a lot of human involvement in these. So a lot of social engineering goes on in addition to just creating a piece of malicious software and just letting it do its thing. There's a lot more work on the back end to try to make sure that it's successful by understanding specific organizations. And that's what's so dangerous and makes it so difficult to protect against. And so we see here, after that warning was issued, the APT-10 group was able to put out quite a few attacks, and it's known that they did actually compromise 9 global service providers. It's most probably more, but those are the 9 that we know about. And so later on, just one that we know about in a little bit more detail is a company called Wipro. They're actually one of India's largest and most successful MSPs, and so they actually fell victim to phishing. And then what happened was this attacking group stayed in their network for a long time and then really tried to learn everything about all of the inner workings of that organization. And then they were now able to launch successful attacks on many of their customers. And so, again, this is the dangerous pieces because they're just lurking in your MSP network, waiting for that right opportunity to, as Nick mentioned before, they see a large transaction coming through, let's intercept that and change the account numbers, something like that. And so really, really difficult to have that be prevented once that attack has happened because that money's already been transferred and they're kind of off to the next thing. And so we can talk a little bit more about what we can do to go ahead and provide that protection. So how to best protect your business. So a couple things that we want to make sure we handle. So you want to provide security awareness training, kind of hopefully protecting yourself from the weakest link, and that's the human firewall. So unfortunately, you could have the best network security and the best email security and the best backups everywhere, but if someone decides to pick up a USB off the street and plug it into the network, who knows what can happen. So if you want to educate yourselves and your customers about proper protocols and why it's important to pay attention to these things and not necessarily introduce things to the environment that could be harmful. You also want to control and closely monitor access to the network. And so going back to that idea of island hopping, or once a single account is compromised, what is that person going to have access to? So if there's only a need for a person to have access to a certain group of accounts or a certain area of the network, you really want to make sure that you limit that properly so that if for some reason that user gets compromised, they're not going to have access to everything and be able to really do some serious damage. And so all this can be done through different administrative rules or different rules on a firewall, and just to make sure, again, that the right people get access to the right information. So it's really key to set up a security policy to make sure that that's all going to be enforced, because every organization is different. Also, you want to ensure proper backups are in place. So as we said before, you have the best security, but if someone does pick up that USB key or gets kind of spearphished, or there's some social engineering and they accidentally give up a password, you want to be able to recover quickly and make sure that you can get back on your feet. And so, unfortunately, it's the nature of the beast. You can have a bike with the best bike lock, but if someone's able to have enough time to cut through it, or they know you're going away for a week, they'll get in there. So you want to make sure that you have a place to recover, or a backup bike in this case. And then use unified threat protection. There's not really a single thing that's going to prevent anything from coming in. So as Nick mentioned before, you want to have stuff that's ensuring that nothing's getting onto your network, that you're not aware of its behavior. So this kind of advanced threat protection where if a file comes in that we don't recognize or have never seen before, or it's just a new release of ransomware, we're able to throw it in the sandbox, do some really kind of resource-intensive operating system emulation, speeding up time, simulating mouse movement, just to get this file to detonate. And then we can understand, oh, this is a new iteration of ransomware. We need to prevent this from getting onto the network. So protect yourself from those zero-day, zero-hour type of attacks. But you also need to protect yourself from that, kind of low-hanging fruit or what we call spray and pray kind of attacks with stuff like spam filters and antivirus and malware protection. So there's a bunch of things that you need to put in place to make sure you're kind of protected on every level. Also, you want to keep compliance in mind. So a lot of organizations have different compliance needs, so segmentation of different pieces of information, or credit card information, or payment info, health records. All these things have different requirements around compliance. So you want to make sure that you're effectively helping your customers stay where they need to be with that. And so a lot of these tools can be leveraged to do that as well, especially archiving for auditing, especially useful to see how everything transpired across the network. And then last, adopting a multi-layered security approach. And so that's kind of the culmination of everything we've been talking about, is that there's not just one single thing that's going to be effective in protecting you from everything. You need to make sure that you have all these different threat vectors and kind of have your bases covered in the sense of how an attacker could get in. And if they do get in, what am I going to do, and how are we going to respond to this? And how are we going to educate people so that it doesn't happen again? So let's talk about what the multi-layered security approach actually looks like. So what we have here what we call Barracuda's defense in depth, and it's kind of broken up into a couple things. We have your security layers, which are going to be your email security and your network security. And then, of course, we're going to have our backup and disaster recovery. And then growing on top of that, we have remote monitoring and management. So this is a really valuable tool to make sure that you can automate all of the processes possible to make your work focus and your time spent more valuable on things that you can really be critical about and make sure that the protection is being put into place. So first, let's talk a little bit about our multi-layered email protection. So if you see, we'll work from the bottom up. You have your email service, so O365 or G Suite or Exchange, whatever that might be. The first thing you're going to want is that gateway defense, and this is kind of table stakes. This is basically providing you that protection from the low-hanging fruit, making sure that you're getting that known malware and known phishing emails all blocked before they even get to that user, so you can provide that protection. We also give you the capability to make sure that you can encrypt sensitive information and keep it in an encrypted environment so that recipient would be able to log into an encrypted environment, see that email, see that information, respond to it, but make sure that that email is always in a secure place. And then, of course, like I mentioned before, that archiving, allowing auditors to track everything, or if there was an attack, to see how it transpired, making sure that that's all built in to that environment. From a resiliency perspective, you want to make sure that you have a backup in place, again, to make sure that if something does happen that was unforeseen, you are still able to get back and maintain that business continuity. And going along with that would be the email continuity. So we have the capability to do some email spooling. So if a server did go out, we can make sure that your business stays up and running while that email provider is going ahead to making those fixes. Moving up, we start to get to some really kind of more advanced technology. So fraud protection, using artificial intelligence to understand the nuances of spear phishing and how some social engineering might have been used to try to get this email to pass. And then the other piece of this is DMARC. So DMARC is basically a tool that allows you to ensure that only email sent from your approved web domains are being processed. And so this prevents other people from being able to spoof or pretend that they're you, and then possibly providing malicious software or links to an end user, which could damage your reputation. This kind of DMARC kind of came about because of PayPal. People were constantly sending emails out to people saying they were PayPal, requesting information from them. People would respond thinking it was PayPal, and then of course have their account compromised. And then everyone started blaming PayPal when unfortunately it was these attackers. And so PayPal really pioneered this technology to make sure that their reputation as a business was protected so that other people couldn't use their name maliciously. And of course, last, the human firewall. You want some security awareness training just to make sure that people understand the importance of this and what they might look like. And so we can kind of run through some scenarios with yourselves and with your customers so that they can see, oh, this is why this email is fraudulent, or this is why I shouldn't respond to this, things of that nature. So the human firewall being the weakest link, you want to turn that weakness into an asset so that they'll see emails and start reporting them to IT saying, hey, this looks like a malicious email. Did anyone else get this? And so hopefully you can make sure that people are being more aware of this, and then making sure that people who might still be struggling get the right attention and education that they need. So from a product perspective, we have what's called our essentials on the bottom. We'll have that as our cloud-based email security, basically protecting you against all those known threats and those unknown threats coming in with that advanced threat protection, as well as providing stuff like encryption and data loss prevention. Sentinel is that really kind of advanced piece that I was talking about to prevent that spear phishing, using advanced algorithms to understand that this person doesn't typically send at this time of day, or this person doesn't log in from this location, but it was a successful login, which really means that that account was compromised. And so you really need to go in there and make those changes. And the hope is here that if you recognize, oh, these email inbox rules were changed, so an attacker has gotten access and they're trying to cover their tracks. So they're still in the learning stage. They haven't done anything malicious yet. But if you can recognize this, hopefully you can get there, make those changes, do that remediation before they are able to do anything malicious. So very powerful tools there. And then, of course, that end user security awareness training fish line that we talked about, making sure that that human firewall is strong. Moving on, we'll talk a little bit about network security. From the bottom up again, a web application firewall, you want to make sure that if a customer has an e-commerce site, any of those fields that you can enter things into aren't going to give an attacker information about the back-end servers, so that they can in turn try to get credit card information and all of these things. So we've got best practices already loaded up in there as a service. Very simple to set up and you're off and running. Our content shield, that's basically going to allow you to provide some endpoint protection, preventing connections to known malware sites, also making sure that the security policy is adhered to, so any unwanted sites aren't going to be visited. And then, of course, the firewall, cloud generation firewall, really useful in making sure that proper access is only granted to certain people, so remote users can connect in through VPN, but maybe only get specific access to certain resources. So all of this built into multiple products to provide this layered approach for protection. And then we can talk a little bit about backup and disaster recovery. So we have multiple capabilities here. From the bottom, the Essentials piece actually includes a cloud-to-cloud backup option for Office 365. But for other more robust backups or for different features, we have Intronis Backup, which is a software-based solution. And we also have just the Barracuda Backup, which is an all-in-one kind of turnkey backup solution. So what's next? Well, you really, again, want to make sure you educate yourself and your employees. You want to utilize these technologies to increase your security posture. And feel free to contact us and learn more about it. We'd be happy to have a demonstration or work with your team to make sure that you have a great understanding of the technology, and then we can help you with anything you might need for a specific organizational need or specific vertical need. We're always happy to help. And with that, thank you very much. And I guess I'll pass it back to Nick. If there are any questions, I'm happy to chat a little more.
Yeah, there's actually, we got two. We have about 5 minutes left, so that's good enough time for us to have a little bit of a conversation. So the first one came in is, what's the most important place to ensure there's protection?
All right. So great question. I actually get that question a lot. Unfortunately, there isn't one. Attackers are kind of consistently going after any weak links they can find. So if they notice that your website doesn't have a web application firewall on it, they're going to try to get credit card information by sending, a SQL injection or some kind of cross-site scripting. A lot of different attacks that they can do from that angle. If they say, oh, nope, your website looks really protected. But it looks like you posted information about a conference you were just at on Facebook. I'm going to go on LinkedIn and see if I can pick out who the CEO is in that picture and see who else was there. Oh, accounts payable is there? Well, I'm going to send an email to them and spearfish them into giving me that access so I can get that information. And the list goes on. So there are just plenty of ways that attackers are looking at to try to get information from an organization for nefarious purposes. So unfortunately, there's no silver bullet, but this defense in depth approach is really the best way to kind of go after this and provide yourself protection. And then, of course, having that backup in your back pocket, just in case something does go awry, you can get back up and running very, very quickly.
Yeah, I would tend to agree on there's no silver bullet, just because of the fact that there's many, many ways that the attackers are trying to come in. But there are some consistent behaviors that exist within attacks, because they're the easiest way for an attacker to gain access to your network and your customer's network. And that comes back to sort of the user. The idea being, I could spend my time trying to go and see if I can gain access to, let's say, an RDP session. RDP sessions are very big these days, especially for ransomware, because they gain access to a machine without too much work. But let's say instead it's a lot easier in some cases just opportunistically send out a whole bunch of emails. You could actually literally get 1 million email addresses for $300 on the dark web. And so that's a whole lot easier to go and opportunistically see what you can gain access to, and then go from there. Now, in the case of, for you guys in the audience, the case of your network specifically being targeted, it's not opportunistic. In fact, Mark, I love the fact that you talked about going on LinkedIn and looking up stuff, because sometimes whenever I'm doing webcasts or speaking at conferences, I'll sometimes have somebody come afterwards, or maybe they'll roll the eyes while I'm talking, and people are like, they really do that much work? And the answer, of course, is yes. And I can speak about that firsthand. I own another company that's a book publishing business, and we brought on an intern that was a young woman right out of college, and she was really eager and enthusiastic, and she put that she was an intern for our company up on LinkedIn, and she was targeted for a CEO gift card scam, where someone sent her an email pretending to be me and said, hey, I'm at this show, which actually, coincidentally, I was at a show, but I think that was just pure luck on their case. But said, I need a bunch of gift cards, and these guys just basically got her for like $3,000 or $4,000. And the reason why I know that she's targeted, the only person that looked at her LinkedIn profile was a profile for, I think if I remember correctly, it was like a bus driver in Detroit. And it just makes no sense that even a bus driver would have a LinkedIn profile. I mean, they might, right? Not knocking bus drivers, but they're just not the kind of people that are going to, I need to network with other bus drivers. So just kind of going, that's really fishy. So for you guys in the audience, These attackers, if they know you exist, they're doing research on you. Mark, I love the fact that you talked about, I think it was the Indian MSP where they sat on the network for days and days and days and did a whole bunch of diligence. That stuff happens. These people, if they figure they can make a lot of money in the long run, they're willing to invest the time because they're making so much money. I mean, think about what you and I make per hour. Everybody on the call today, these people are literally putting ads in the dark web saying, hey, if you're a developer, you can come work for us. We'll pay you $50,000 a month. And after 2 years, we bumped that up to $75,000 a month. I mean, they're making money hand over fist. They have plenty of time, plenty of money, plenty of resources. So, so I think that coming back full circle, because we're at the bottom of the hour here, is just the most important place to ensure there's protection. I think in my mind, a lot of ways it comes back to the user. I think that's the weakest link. I'm glad that you brought up security awareness training, Mark, because I think that's really important as well.
Yeah.
And it looks like the bottom of the hour. So, and we actually sort of attacked both questions that were in the Q&A box. So I think we're good. So, Mark, thanks for a great presentation today. Appreciate the covering of both attacks and what Barracuda MSP can do.
Thanks for having me. And thank you, everyone.
Yeah, it was good stuff. Yeah, thank you guys for your attention and attendance today. And that concludes today's webcast, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.